everybody doing the same thing, over communicating, that top down approach of like, you need to stay here, you need to do it this way. It's also making sure that they see the benefit in it. I think the groundwork is really, building out the right plan and the right strategy for that process. And so I think that, begins with not only working with, leadership and the stakeholders, but also working with the users in the team that will be affected by that process, and making sure that it makes sense for them and that they're also driving the recommendation of this process, because at the end of the day, you want this process to enhance their workflow. You want it to make sense for them. You want it to make them better. And so I think initially, the groundwork is connecting with them, understanding what's, not working. How can we, tweak that process and make that process better? And, once you identify that, then it's, going to work and kind of starting to build that process. How can you enhance that process, making sure the technologies that process sits in will work? How do you make the user experience and that technology seamless? And then it's over communication. It's making sure everybody understands the roadmap, understands when these changes will take place, make sure they understand what they're expected to do and how this will affect their workflow. And as long as you over communicate, make sure you're constantly in front of them, make sure you're listening to them. I think that is really how you lay that groundwork for that successful process rollout.
That's awesome. And what does the day-to-day look like? Is it going to be like regular meetings, like regular Zoom meetings? Can you talk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends on, what the overall workload looks like. So if this is kind of one of many projects, it might not be, daily meetings, maybe it's more weekly meetings, but I definitely think that there needs to be a regular cadence of communication, and a regular cadence of, getting together to build out that process. And you're probably going to have, different meetings for different people. So you might have maybe a weekly one with the revenue operations team or some of the operations people to really be in the nitty gritty, defining and figure out what this process is going to look like, from a technology standpoint, and how does this process flow. And then maybe you're going to have a weekly one also with your users to give them progress updates and say, does this fit the requirements? Is this going to fit within your workflow? Is this process change going to help you be better? Maybe it's a weekly one, or maybe it's a bi-weekly one, depending on the scope with the stakeholders, just to, a quick one to bring them up to speed, to help them understand, hey, here's where we're at. Over the next week or two, here's what we plan on accomplishing. Here's any roadblocks we're running into. But just making sure you're communicating with the right people at the right time and communicating the right things to them, because not everybody has to be involved in everything. So making sure you understand that.
So over communication doesn't necessarily mean like just speak to everyone, making sure you're speaking to the right people. Okay. Yeah. Bryan, could you talk me through champions and key influences? What are your thoughts there? Why are they important or not so important when it comes to process change?
Yes, so we've always felt like champions are really valuable, and we try to have champions at every level. So when you're talking about leadership, having a champion at leadership, because at the end of the day, you can roll out the best process, a process that's going to work for the users that are affected by that. But if you don't have leadership buy-in to hold people accountable, then it's still going to fail. And so I think having a champion at leadership to make sure that that's being cascaded to the rest of the leadership team, and that they're also cascading that message down from a top-down approach, to help people understand the benefit of this process change, is super valuable. I think also having champions among the users.
Mm,
So we always try to have super users with any process rollout or technology rollout, where we get them in initially, and they're the ones that are helping scope this. And usually it's probably users that are are talented and strong users,
mhm,
because you want to make sure it works for them. But I think it also is good to have varied experiences so that you're not just listening to one targeted segment of your user base.
mm,
And so I think having kind of multiple champions, or as we call them here, like super users, to really build that out
mhm,
with you. So, and then even do a pilot or a test phase with them, so that then when you do go to roll it out to everybody, it's not, hey, here's revenue operations or leadership rolling this process out. It's, hey, it's the Service Express, it's our company rolling this out. And oh, by the way, here's what your team members, our super users, had to say, because I think that gets then everybody else more buy-in. Here's what the champions
mm.
say on how this positively impacted their workflow.
That's awesome. And because you've got these champions in early on, they've helped to like give feedback to the process and see what's working.
Yeah, and I think that also that builds the buy-in for the rest of the users, because
Mm,
they know that you're taking their considerations in. You're
mhm,
not, even if it's not them specifically, you're taking their team members that they trust, that they respect. You took their feedback and you built that into the process.
mm. And like Brian, you work for a big organization. So having these leaders on board really helps with having communication at scale, doesn't it?
Yes, it definitely does, because they can take that. Earlier on, I've been with the company I work for 7.5 years, and we've
Mhm,
definitely done rollouts in the past where it was like our team led,
mm,
and it just, you learn from your mistakes. It doesn't go over well when you have that leadership buy-in, that
mhm,
leadership, the leader team championing it. It
mm,
definitely helps drive adoption and buy-in from everybody.
Okay. Could you tell me about long-term adoption? What are your thoughts there? How do you do that well? What does the cadence look like?
Yeah, I think from long-term adoption, once again, I think it depends on the scope of the project, or the type of project. We I'll go, it wasn't, I guess, necessarily a process, but it was a few years ago we rolled out Salesforce's Lightning UI
Mhm,
to our team. And we definitely we started this process with our team, probably a year in advance, got super users and leadership involved, 6 to 8 months in advance before we launched to everybody. And what we did from a long-term standpoint was we gave them about, I would say, a month to a month and a half. It might have been about 6 weeks to toggle back and forth, and help build their current processes into kind of the new UI and user interface. Um, and just the whole time, once again, it was that open communication. It was the top-down approach of like, nope, you got to do it this way. It was making sure that they start their day out using the new processes or the new user interface. So they had to take the action to get out of the new process or the new UI and get back into kind of the old way of doing it. And what ended up happening, it was funny, we um, turned everything off to where they had to be in the Lightning UI, follow the new processes, use the new user interface. And
mhm,
I would say maybe a couple of weeks to a month after that, we ended up pushing a sandbox refresh, not realizing that when we pushed that sandbox refresh, it turned a couple of our profiles back to classic instead of Lightning.
mhm,
And instead of those users just going with the flow and not saying anything, people freaked out and wanted to get back. Like, we need lightning, we need lightning. Like, they didn't want to
mhm,
stay classic. And so I was like, all right, at that point, you knew you had done your job well when people freaked out when the new process or new technology wasn't in front of them. And I think at that point, the long term is just um, everybody doing the same thing, over
mm,
communicating, that top down approach of like, you need to stay here, you need to do it this way. And it's also making sure that they see the benefit in it. So if you don't lay that groundwork and do those right things up front to help them see the why and
Mhm.
understand, like, this is how this is going to make me better, no matter what you do down the road, they're not going to want to stay in this, and they're going to look for any opportunity to do things the old way.
Mhm.
You definitely got to do things the right way in the beginning, to have that long-term effect.
Mm. I like what you said there, Brian. So before we started recording, how processes are so important as a foundation to the sales team. So that kind of just like goes back to that idea of building foundations, the groundwork, knowing the why, and then it will set you up for the long term. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, what about tech? How does tech play a part? Is there anything that you would suggest or anything that helps with driving adoption?
Yeah, so I guess when you're talking about like technology adoption or still like process adoption, but making sure like the technology works for it.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's a lot of the same practices. It's just making sure that you're building out that technology for your users. Making sure that as they're, looking at something as simple as just like a page layout in Salesforce, that the fields they need are readily available and they don't have to scroll through a huge page to find the different fields that are required. Making sure you understand their processes and their
Mhm.
workflow, so that if you know that typically for a sales user or a user in Salesforce, if for their role in the company, that they're going to fill out this information and then fill out this information, try to put those fields next to each other. Don't put one field up here and then make them scroll half a page to find that other field to fill out, when in their typical workflow they fill those out at the same time.
Mm.
um, and it's also making sure that the technology works for your processes, and in trying to automate as much as possible. There's always going to be manual workload and manual things that people have to do. But
Mhm.
if you can help make the technology work for them and automate any spot that you can, it's going to make their lives a lot easier. And it's just going to get more adoption around any process, or adoption around any technology that you roll out.
Okay. What do you think goes wrong, Brian? Why do you think sometimes reps find it difficult to adopt new technology?
I think there can be various reasons. I think, sometimes companies can get in the habit, or the next shiny object, and so they
Mhm.
just kind of run to technologies. Oh, here's a cool technology, we want to implement this technology, without really understanding the why and
Mhm.
actually having a problem to solve. So I think one of the first things is, making sure you actually have a problem to solve, and
Mhm.
that problem that you're trying to solve can't be fixed with the current technology you have. It can't be fixed with a process tweak or a people tweak. Like, I feel like you always should start people and process.
Mm.
Then if you can't fix a problem or solve a problem with one of those areas, then you can look to a technology to say, all right, how can this technology solve this? um, I think another thing is making sure you have a good grasp on your whole tech stack.
Mhm.
So I know at a lot of companies they have different groups that bring on technologies, and so you might have one technology over here, another technology over here, or even with the same group, sometimes you can just get in these situations where you have redundant technologies, and so you have
Mm.
two technologies that kind of do the same thing or can be used for the same thing. And I think in that sense, reps just get confused, like, okay,
Mm.
I can do this specific thing in both of these technologies, where am I actually supposed to do it? um, and you're not helping them by giving them multiple ways to do something. You're actually hindering their day to day when you give those, because it just is confusing.
Mm.
So I think those are two big areas. Just making sure that you're actually solving a problem, because if you're solving a problem and making their lives easier, they're going to want to be in the technology, they're going to want to use it.
Mhm.
um, and if you're also making sure you're not bringing on a redundant technology, you're not bringing on something that is already in place where they can already do things, because it's just going to cause confusion and
Mhm.
they're not going to know where to do it. And so some reps are going to pick one, some reps are going to pick another tool,
Mm.
or some might just be like, I don't even know what to do, so I'm going to do it a totally different way.
Yeah.
So I would say those are two key things.
Awesome. Okay. And it's going to be like the story you said before about you had a new process. After 6 weeks, something happened, and they're going to be like, what's happening? I'm used to this way of working now. So it's going to have a lot of confusion.
Exactly. Yeah. And in that situation with that, when we rolled that out, it's like they saw the why. They saw how the new user, it was Salesforce Lightning. So it wasn't like a new technology, but they saw
Mm,
how the new UI and then kind of the new processes benefited them, and
mm,
quickly they adopted and loved it. So then when all of a sudden there was a little hiccup that put them back into the old UI and some old processes, they were like, no, I
yeah.
need to get back to what, the new way, because it works really well.
Yeah. That must have been really great for you as an indication. Like, I'm doing a great job right now.
It was. As a RevOps team, we were like, as much as we don't want to have that hiccup happen, it was
Mhm,
definitely validating. And, it was like, oh yeah, this is
mm,
awesome. Like they want this.
mm. Awesome. Okay. What about we know about the why and how important it is. Could you talk to me about data capture? What evidence do you use to convince your reps that this is why you should change a process?
Yeah. So from a data standpoint, I think it all comes down to if you can use the data to tell the story that this is how you become better. Or
Mm,
we know that, like if we're talking about like opportunities, for example, like if we know if this information gets filled out, we win more deals when this information gets filled out. Or if we can explain the story back, on opportunities as well, like capturing like win-loss data or capturing information like this is going to help us be better, because we can learn from, all right, what happens on deals that we win, what happens on deals that we lose, and how can we learn from that? How can then we
mhm,
replicate the things that we do that win, so that we can build trainings around that, we can
mm,
help people who might not be doing that do those things that win, so we can all be better. And then just on the opposite side, for things that we lose, like what might be happening where we're losing deals? Like, can we identify that with, through data, and transform how we're doing different things within the sales process, provide training on things like, hey, let's not, don't do this. So I think as long, once again, if you can use that data to help show them how they can be better, whether it's closing one more deal a year, or
mhm,
um, closing one more deal a month even, or doing things like that, that's going to positively impact their business and help them
mhm.
be better. I think people are always going to sign up for that.